Good evening and
Hello.
welcome. Hi, Katie. How are you doing?
Hey, Bruce. I'm great. How are you? It's good morning for me. Good evening for you.
Okay. And I was going to say we're live on Facebook. We're going to be uploading the audio of this onto podcasts as well. So if anyone's listening on a podcast, we'll give out some details later on of Katie's organization and what we do as well. So it's the first of what we're hoping to be a monthly podcast, and we just need to double check. We've just had a quick chat with Katie, so hopefully we can do it first Wednesday of each month.
Yeah, that would be great.
And we were just saying before we started, it's just going to be a general chit chat. And if anyone's got any questions, please feel free to fire away on the questions and answers. But Katie and I are just going to, I suppose the Scottish expression is chin wag. I don't know if you use that expression in the States.
Never heard that before. What does that mean?
That just means chin wag. It just means just chit chat.
Okay.
Just
chat wag
away.
The chin.
Wag the chin, yeah.
Okay.
So Scottish expression, I think. So yeah. Do you want to just start, Katie, just by introducing yourself and who you are and what you're doing?
Yeah. So my name's Katie Lane, and I am an advocate and a coach for the Sinclair method. I went on TSM myself in 2017 and just had amazing success. It helped me quit drinking after a year on the method. So I have really developed a full personal passion to just get the word out about this method, because I think you probably know this to be true as well, Bruce. Whenever anyone finds out about this, they say, how come I didn't hear about this before? And that was my thought as well when I got on the method. So since I started it over 3 years ago, I've just been a full-on advocate for it, as it totally changed my life in ways I never thought imaginable. So I coach through embodieddaily.com. I also create content and videos. I love to interview people. I'm going to have you on my channel eventually here pretty soon, hopefully. Just love to put out information and educate people about this method. Yeah.
Brilliant. And you've got a whole load of, you documented your whole journey on the Sinclair method, didn't you, on YouTube?
Yes, I did. It started, I was just going to do one video the first month, and then I kept creating them because I got such positive feedback from people in the community, and people were so encouraged and supportive. And, you know, kind of in the back of my mind, I thought, oh my gosh, what kind of repercussion am I going to get for sharing this? But it was quite the opposite. I got an outpouring of positive support. So I documented the journey pretty much every month for about the first year or so, and then I stopped doing it as frequently, but still give updates here and there.
And I've had a lot of clients as well that have said that they've watched the videos on YouTube and loved them. Absolutely loved them.
Awesome. That means so much. It really does. Yeah.
So
and so what? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
You're impacting people across here in Scotland as well. Where are you? You're West Coast, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm in the Bay Area of California.
Sunshine.
Yeah. Yeah, we were just talking. You're like, yeah, it's snowing today. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to speak. It's sunny and moderate.
There were a couple of guys on the Zoom meetings the other day. We'll talk about the Zoom meetings later. They were sitting by the swimming pool on the Zoom meeting, and I said, you need to get away from the swimming pool because I will kick you out the meeting.
New rule.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. So what are you up to? I mean, I know I see you posting a lot on Instagram, and you've been doing some fundraising. I'm curious what you're up to with Alcohol Recovery Scotland and your involvement with TSM.
Yeah, my background, as you know, was alcohol and drug rehab management. So I was working in rehab centers, in abstinent-based programs, and I loved every minute of it. Long story short, I was a manager and deputy manager in two centers, and the first one closed, and I spent about a year trying to raise the funds to restart it, and that didn't work out just because funding's really difficult to get hold of. And I then thought there must be a better concept or a cheaper way of doing it, actually, is what I was looking for. So I went right through the internet, and I came across the famous TED Talk thing, switched it off halfway through and said, what an absolute load of rubbish. Doesn't work. I won't say what else I said about it. Went back to it the next day for some reason, and then something inside of me, I thought, well, if some of that works, then I could implement some of it and I could use some of it. But then the more I looked into it, the more I realized, wow, they're claiming a 78% success rate. Even if I could get 50%, I would be happy.
Yeah.
And it was a much cheaper model. It could be done online. It could be done over the phone through Zoom. So yeah, so I started 2 years ago, and we've been lucky enough to get funding to pay my salary, which has been amazing, just from private funders.
Wow.
So we're looking for other funding to move forward. So we're looking at going into the corporate market, the commercial market. We're looking at going into what we would call a social enterprise in this country, which is it's we're setting up the whole process so that we're going to do a lot of work in companies and organizations to create an income to then grow the concept of the Sinclair method throughout Scotland.
That's amazing.
And be able to offer it to the biggest challenge we have here is at the moment it's private, but we want to make it available to anyone and everyone. So the social enterprise will allow us to do that. So
that is wonderful.
Yeah, and we're seeing, I'm still to this day stunned each week the results that we're having.
Wow. How does it compare to what you saw in traditional rehab, since that's your background? What was the success rate?
I don't know, because it wasn't tracked. And if it was tracked, it was only tracked during people's stay, because once people left, there wasn't really any kind of figures to follow that up. What would I would estimate about 10% success. But again, I suppose it depends on how people are measuring it. And sometimes it's for the period of time when they're in the rehab. Sometimes it's the period of time after the rehab. Is it a year, 2 years, 5 years? How are people measuring it? What I did realize was that the relapse rate was massive. It was big. No fault of the rehabs, no fault of, yourself, you know it better than I do. But yeah, and it was hard, I have to say. I was saying to someone the other day, the crazy thing about what I do is at the moment with the Sinclair method is almost every conversation I have on the phone with a client is positive.
Yeah.
Whereas in the rehab centers, it was just survival. It was just, don't go to weddings, don't go to this, don't do that, don't do this. When you leave, because the craving is still there. But anyway, that's going into TSM stuff. So, but yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. It's so nice to work with clients who are at whatever level they're at, and seeing a positive outcome.
Yeah. On
a regular basis, and it's good. It's good.
Yeah, it's still like, I'm almost 3 years sober, and I still am like so surprised sometimes at how different sobriety is through the Sinclair method route as opposed to just abstinence kind of cold turkey route. Because I tried that. I made it 6 months. So it was the longest. But like you said, it was like I was avoiding these occasions. I wasn't going here. I wasn't seeing that person. I was triggered here. And it was just so much about resisting that urge. Whereas the Sinclair method, like, I just don't even think about alcohol anymore. It doesn't even occur to me. I think, as Claudia said in her talk, it doesn't occur to me to drink. And it's so freeing. Sobriety before was just a battle every day. And I truly commend people who are able to achieve abstinence through that approach, because I tried dozens of times to get sober, and it would last a couple days, a couple months, and it never lasted. TSM is such a better route to go about it, I feel.
Do you, this is, again, I'm going to ask a few loaded questions because I know what some of the answers are, but it's just for everybody else. So you obviously notice the difference between an abstinent-based, or what is the main difference between the abstinent-based recovery and Sinclair method recovery?
The abstinence-based, in my experience, as I understand how alcohol addiction functions on the brain, my brain still felt hijacked by alcohol. So even though I wasn't consuming it, my mind was obsessed with the thoughts. I was constantly triggered. I was constantly having to kind of tiptoe around anything relating to alcohol. I would go to a party and I wouldn't drink, and I would feel like, oh man, I wish I could drink. Like, this is awful. How much longer can I do this? It was really hard. And as I said, even though I wasn't consuming alcohol, it still occupied a ton of space in my mind, and the cravings were there. Now, contrast to TSM, it's just, I didn't, it took me a year on the method to go abstinent. So I didn't like do it right away. I did it when I felt like I was ready. And honestly, that was not my end goal. I just kind of wound up there, as many people do, because you just truly lose interest in alcohol. But it's just so much more freeing now. I can go to a party, and if I'm not drinking, it's because I genuinely don't want to drink. Like, I don't smoke cigarettes. I'm not going to smoke because I just don't smoke. It doesn't occur to me to even do it. And so there's no thoughts. Like, the only time I think about alcohol is when we're talking about it here, or it's my daily work, but I'm not triggered by it. I can have a bottle of wine in the room and it might as well be a stapler. It's like totally no emotional reaction or response. Whereas before, if there was a bottle of wine, I'd be staring at it, measuring how much there was, saying, okay, I can't have it. But it's just, it doesn't occur to me anymore. It's really amazing.
And I'm still blown away with that. Like you said it just at the very beginning, the one thing that I never learnt through my previous work, or one thing we were never taught or trained about, was the actual, what is happening in the brain that is creating the issue in the first place. And it all just made so much logical sense to me that when I understood what was happening in here and what was creating the craving and the addiction side of things, and then all of a sudden when you had naltrexone and it explained that it sat on the receptors, reduced the flow of the endorphins, broke down the neurological pathways. Once I started to understand all of that, it just made so much logical sense.
Yeah, it really does. And once you experience it on the method, you're like, what? I left alcohol in the glass, or I didn't think about it till 5 o'clock today, whereas before I'd start thinking about it at noon. It's just, and one other thing I will say too is I feel, and I think Gary, who is in the One Little Pill documentary and a TSM success story, he says he feels relapse proof and trigger proof because of this method. And on my channel, I will still get, on my YouTube, I'll get comments like, you're only 2 years sober, like a relapse could happen any day. And it's interesting to me because, never say never. And I have naltrexone if I want to drink, but I just don't feel like I would relapse because the desire isn't there. And, at the same time, I've built up new coping mechanisms and habits and things like that. But in contrast to before TSM, it was like I felt like a relapse was right around the corner. It was just a matter of my willpower. How much longer can I hang on to this abstinence until I finally give in? But with TSM, like, I don't fear a relapse. I've been through some of the hardest things of my life recently and haven't even considered to take a sip of alcohol at all. So that also is really, really freeing. Yeah.
I think it takes people a while, especially if people are coming from abstinent backgrounds. I think as well, because that's all we've ever, or society, and even the recovery industry, if that's what we want to call it, is the only thing they've ever known is abstinence. So when you come along and you sort of say, well, we can do a reduction program alongside medication, and then it's like, what medication? What medication? Or you're using drugs to get rid of one thing. And until people actually understand the process, the number of people that I speak to, the number of inquiries that I get, and I do two things when someone phones up for an inquiry. I explain to them what causes we call it alcohol dependency in this country, but you call it AUD. What causes the alcohol dependency, alcohol use disorder? When I explain to them that that's what's happening compared to an abstinent-based process, just a light bulb goes on and they go, that's why I struggle when I try and stop. That's why when I went abstinent last time, I struggled because the deprivation effect and blah, blah, and that the craving builds and builds and builds and builds. And then eventually someone gives into the craving at some point. And if you take the craving away, then we still have to deal, you know yourself, that's why what you do, but we have to deal with the emotional habitual process of why people are drinking. But that's so much easier that I always say to people that as you're reducing, because the craving is not kicking in at the back of it, the reduction and learning to deal with life again without alcohol is so much nicer and gentler and graceful doing it this way rather than just stopping immediately, which works. And for some people that works. But stopping you have to deal with the craving, the physical side, and then you also have to deal with the emotional, psychological, and then life hits you like that, and you've got no drink all of a sudden, and it's I think it's just too much for people too quickly. So
yeah. Can we talk about that? I want to get your input on that piece of TSM, because from my perspective, the medication is crucial to create space for people to really heal and work on their relationship with alcohol and creating new habits and rituals. But what's your experience working with people? Because I often see that can be the thing that will trip people up the most. They'll be on the medication, they'll see the difference, but then when it comes to changing that habit or finding a new way to cope at the end of a stressful day, that can really hang people up because alcohol perhaps has been their best friend and companion for years or decades. So what are kind of some strategies or thoughts you have on that for people who may be at that place on TSM or maybe heading that way?
It's hard, and it's because it's what you do as well. So it's really hard to promote this. So I'll promote this for America, and then you can promote it for Scotland.
Great.
Because it's what I do, and then people think, "Oh, you're just trying to promote what you do." But like you're saying, the medication, I believe, will do for the whole process. Will do 40 to 50% of the process. The other process is the habitual, psychological, emotional side. But the longer I'm involved with the Sinclair method, the more I'm realizing, and Claudia is talking about it constantly now, and you're talking about it now, is the support program, the coaching side of it. Because all I ask clients to do is to be 100% compliant with the medication, send me a weekly drink diary, and give me a phone call once a week where we can just talk through next week's goals and targets and things to do. So what then happens is from all the diaries that I've got through from clients, I notice on almost every single diary that I get from people, there is a 30 to 50% drop within the first week to 2 weeks. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Almost every time it drops, and it sometimes goes up again a little bit, but it drops and then maybe it drops 50% and goes up to 40%. And then it levels out. And then at that point, I've noticed with some people that I've worked with and some people in Zoom meetings and things like that, where I've realized that they then level out and they've been there for a year or 2 years. And I asked them, have you had that initial drop? Yeah. And then it's leveled out. Yeah. And then they kind of then go into this area of, right, what do I do now? With the thought of, if I take more medication, that might work. And then that doesn't work. And then they try this and try that. But what they really need is, for the States, they need someone like yourself who can walk them through the next stage and the next stage. And sometimes it's as simple as saying, I love that expression that you used. The medication creates space for people it gives them the space to change and adapt to life without alcohol. And because I call it stage 2. Stage 1 is that initial drop from the medication. Stage 2 is learning to adjust to life. Now that might need counseling, it might need psychiatric support, it might need additional medication from the doctor for anxiety or depression, it might not. But that second process, the biggest danger I think we have in this country is that as the Sinclair method gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and once doctors do start to prescribe it more, is that there has to be a support structure, I don't just mean counselor, because you know yourself, it has to be someone who knows the program.
Yeah.
So if you're in America and you're listening, get in touch with Katie. But no, I mean, I'm not saying that just for promotion, but I've seen it happen. I've seen through the support. I've seen people that have had the support and they drop and then they struggle for a while because they don't know where to go next.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's stage 2 of it. I call it stage 2, the reduction, the manual reduction process, which is a result of habits.
Yeah.
And that includes your life circumstances, emotional stuff, marriages. It can be good things. It can be weddings. It can be coming out of restrictions from COVID. It's going to increase a little bit.
Yeah.
But it allows. A lot of people phone me up and they go, "Oh, I had a bad week this week. I had an extra 5 drinks this week." And I say, "Fantastic." I said, "Did you take your pill?" And they said, "Yeah." I said, "Great, no problem.
Yeah.
Let's just go on to next week."
Exactly. I know I view those as such learning opportunities when people overdrink, because then there's the opportunity to look back and be like, okay, what was the trigger? What was I doing that was different? And then for next time, you can move on from it. I know for me, when I overdrank on TSM, it was always the most memorable and valuable learning opportunity, because I'd be a little hungover. I'd be like, oh man, I was doing so good, but truly an opportunity to learn.
Yeah.
Especially
I was just going to say as well, if we've got some people on, so if anyone has got any questions, Katie's the expert. Fire away.
No, Bruce, I'm pointing the finger back at you.
No, honestly, if anyone has got any questions, please just fire away with it. I was going to ask you as well. With it actually came up in 2 conversations that I had with clients today. Was I quite often get people phoning me up and saying the taste of wine is changing. I don't like the taste of wine. Did that happen with you, or have you heard of that before?
Often, yes. It happened. I used to be a red wine fanatic, and by the end of TSM, it just tasted like vinegar and alcohol. Like I lost a wine taste, and so I would try to drink wine and I'd take a few sips and couldn't touch it anymore. And I've heard that with other people as well, and it really made me think, or just like look at alcohol differently, because I was like, oh, without the pleasure or the endorphins, like I was seeing alcohol for what it really was, and wine specifically, it was vinegar and alcohol. It like lost the allure of it. But yeah, I've talked with people as to why that is. I don't have a clear answer. I'm curious if you have thoughts, but for me, I could still drink beer and really enjoyed the taste of beer, but wine was no good.
I have a guess, and I have to emphasize, because we're live, and this will go out on podcast, that this is a guess. It's not an answer. What I'm guessing at is obviously that when people take naltrexone, it reduces the flow of the endorphins in the brain. So normally when people are drinking, I need to dig out the video sometime. I watched a video the other day, and it was talking about how they measure the endorphins in the brain, and how high up the level of endorphin goes for someone who's dependent on alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes from about 100 up to 1,200, he was saying. So I've come to the theory or thought that when people are drinking, when they have the glass of wine, they get that instant rush of endorphins in the brain, and therefore that takes over everything. The drive for that first drink, and then once you get past your first drink and the second drink and the third drink, they start coming under the influence of alcohol. So they then get drunk, and we then have this. We have a very, very cheap wine in this country called Buckfast, which is horrible. And so what we then have a joke and say, well, by the time you get to your 4th glass and your 5th glass, then you could be drinking anything, really.
Yeah.
But because it's reducing the flow of the endorphins, they're not getting that massive hit. So therefore, they're actually more aware of the taste of what they're drinking. And because wine is quite acidic, I think it's acidic, they then taste the wine, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, actually, I enjoyed the hit it gave me. And then after the first glass, it really didn't matter what I was drinking. But that's my theory. I've got nothing to back that up with. But
well, I think you're onto something. That makes sense to me.
So I said that to someone the other day, and they said, Professor Rose. We'll have to give you.
Yeah, you're going to change your name title.
The only thing is, I don't have the research to back that one up. So say that as a
well,
disclaimer.
That's funny. I like that Eric in the chat said, every time I take my naltrexone, I have a learning session. I love that perspective.
Yeah. And and Marta as well. Me too. She said she can't stand wine now. So
Yeah.
yeah, and that's a common thing, very very common. So what's your biggest learning thing from the Sinclair method? What have you learned most from it? Either about the process, or what is it that still kind of makes you go, wow?
I think what a deception alcohol addiction is and what a trap, because when you're in it, you really feel like you need it for everything. It truly makes you dependent on it. It becomes a crutch, and you kind of look out on life, at least I did, and it was like, man, I can't do anything without alcohol because alcohol makes everything fun. I truly believed that. I kind of thought life was boring without alcohol. And with the Sinclair method working as it does to kind of detach that relationship with alcohol, I began to see that that was just, I mean, a deception in a way, where actually life is more fun, things are more funny, flowers smell better, life is just better without alcohol. But I truly believed that I needed it to have fun. And so that is my personal learning. And when I coach people, I see people, we're talking about when they hit a plateau, there is a challenge a lot of people hit where, they want to change their relationship with alcohol, but they're still kind of associating it as their best friend and identifying as someone who loves wine and loves to drink on the weekends. And it really does feel like you have to break up with this substance over time. And that can be really hard, because I know for me, it was my comfort. It was my best friend. It knew me. It was everything. And so it was a process of having to let that go. And I see that as a hurdle for a lot of people who, are ready to change their relationship with alcohol, but then that really does mean like changing how you perceive and view and treat alcohol. You're no longer someone who goes to it Friday nights to polish off a bottle and numb out. So you've got to really change how you're using it. If you want to be a moderate drinker, you have to do things that would be conducive of what a moderate drinker would do. And that means maybe having one glass and not a bottle, having healthier coping mechanisms, having different hobbies, not having alcohol every day, all of these things. And I know that was a challenge for me. It was kind of a sad thing, actually. I was like, oh man, like alcohol is not what I thought it was. But yeah. What about you?
It's, I'm still constantly stunned.
Yeah.
Constantly. And just to hear the stories and I'm getting a bit of feedback here. I hope it's not coming across. The stories that I hear, it's just, I think that when I first heard about it, I was so excited, and I read about the 78%. No, I went from being very, very angry, I have to say, when I first heard about the 78%, because I had worked in the industry where, unfortunately, I'd been to too many funerals. I'd been with clients and things like that. And so when I heard the 78%, I got really angry initially. And then that's why I switched it off. Then I got really excited when I realized that it was actually true. Then I went through the stage where, again, I got really, really angry, because I thought, hang on a minute, this has a clinically trialed, researched 78% success rate. Why is this not? There are people out there? You've seen people struggling with the drinking issues, and there's a solution. There is a solution that has a really high success rate. And if you apply that to everything else, all the other programs, whatever program fits, works well. But you've got a program that's got a 78% success rate. I then went through a stage where I got really angry, where I was going to sit outside our parliament down here, and I was going to get arrested. I'll do. And then I went through a stage where I just got really sad. It was just like, wow, this is just. And then I started working with people. And I just saw result after result after result after result. And I remember I worked in the house initially, and coming from an abstinent-based rehab center where the majority of the time it wasn't success stories, to coming into working with this, I remember coming downstairs from where I was working in tears some nights and saying to my wife, this works. this works.
Wow.
And then there was another one, and then another one, and another one, and then you'd hear the stories, and and yourself, you just can't. And then you think back to the people that you've worked with in the past or known in the past, and you're thinking, well, if it was just around 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it could have had an impact there as well. So
Yeah.
I think the thing that gets me to this day is it works. It works. We have an expression in this country. There's an advert. It does what it says it does on the tin. It says 78% success, and all I can say to people, and Claudia says it, just check it out. Check out the science of it, and it works. That's the thing that I got. Can I ask you a couple of quick questions? Because I know this is coming in. Katie, did you find that other pleasures diminished for you on naltrexone, food or other things that you did?
That's a good question. And I know a lot of people are wondering about that or concerned if they go on the method. And for me, in my experience, I did not, that I noticed. I would say that some days on naltrexone, the day after, I would feel kind of just down, like a little depressed. And, I don't know if that's because, with naltrexone, it's blocking the pleasure reinforcement of alcohol. So I was more feeling the depressing effects of it. I don't know. But that was something that I experienced. But I would say like the benefits of it far outweighed that kind of temporary expense. And then, on just to kind of go on top of that is I was really, in the book, The Cure for Alcoholism, Dr. Escapa talks about how it's important to have those days where you're not drinking, you're not taking naltrexone, and you're doing other healthy endorphin producing activities. So I really took that seriously. And I would, whenever I was having an alcohol-free day, I would intentionally do something that was really nourishing and pleasurable for myself, even if it meant only letting myself have an ice cream or a delicious meal or watch some funny videos. But I was really proactive about seeking out things that were making me feel good, just so I could experience them and kind of create new habits and experiences where I was getting those healthy endorphins and simultaneously blocking the ones coming from alcohol.
Yeah. Okay. And then the next question from Marta was, can I ask why and how Katie moved to abstinence?
Yeah. So it was not my plan. Again, like I really just wanted to be a moderate drinker and have control. And that was really my plan, I would say, for the first 8 months on the Sinclair method. But the longer I was on the method, the last few months I was drinking about once a month, and I just wasn't enjoying it anymore. Like I would take a naltrexone and have wine with dinner or something, and I just didn't care for the taste. I didn't care for the buzz. I would feel a little like hungover and out of it the next day. And so it would almost take me, like one drinking session would take me maybe 2 days to recover from. And so it was just no longer as pleasurable. And what really kind of kicked it off was I went on my husband's from France, and we went to a trip over there. And because I was having these kind of like non-pleasurable drinking sessions, I was like, I'm just going to take a break and not drink while we're in France, just so I can feel good the whole time. And that was a 3-week trip that turned into a month of not drinking, and then 2 months of not drinking. And I just kept not wanting to drink. Like time just kept passing and I wasn't even thinking about it. And so after 4 months of kind of accidental sobriety, I decided to go sober altogether. And, with that too, I'd done a lot of work on myself. I'd kind of created a whole new life that was not the one I had when I was addicted to alcohol. So I had a lot more responsibilities and hobbies and passions, a lot more self-care practices. And so like those things were really outweighing my desire for alcohol as well. So I kind of had created this life that I didn't want to, escape from with alcohol anymore.
Fantastic. And again, if anyone's got any other questions, please just fire away in. Some of you guys might have noticed that I've just deleted a comment in the comments. And I used to apologize about it, but I don't anymore. And he just, the guy just came on and said, what an absolute load of rubbish, but he didn't put it in such a nice language.
Okay.
Which is fair enough.
Yeah.
Absolutely fair enough.
I get those comments on my YouTube all the time. You liar. Abstinence is the only way.
Well, I was going to say was I used to try and sort of explain and discuss it. And there is one organization that I'm not going to obviously mention, but that we sometimes get. The only negative I ever get about the program is from one little group of people, and that always seems to come on. And at that stage, I used to try and explain it and do that, all that kind of things.
Yeah.
I've got a dog barking outside. Sorry,
That's okay.
my wife's just going to get it. But then I realized that I used to be polite and try and, but then I realized that the organization that they were involved with was, I would do everything I could to promote the work that they do, because I know a lot of people who have been very successful through that work, and if that works, and I know you're exactly the same, Katie, that we support every program that works for anybody.
Yeah.
If I always used to say, if standing on your head reciting the alphabet backwards works, then I will support it till I'm blue in the face.
Exactly.
But it's just to say that, yeah, we understand it, but all I say to people is check out the evidence. If anyone's not sure about what's happening, I'm more than happy to do a live discussion or debate or anything with anybody. I've seen it work, and I can, anyway, that's going off to different thing completely.
No. Well, I mean, like the reaction you had too, how you were angry at first. I've had people who are in AA, they found my channel, and one woman told me, I blocked you, I was so mad at you. And then she ended up transitioning from AA to TSM. And I don't advocate that unless someone really wants to do it, going from sobriety to TSM. But then she transitioned about a year later and was having success on the method. But I understand why people feel like it can't work, because it is so totally different than what we've been told are the ways we should be treating addiction. So I get it. And those people have their right to their opinion. So,
absolutely. Yeah. So, okay. What else can we talk? I haven't, the thing tonight is I haven't put down any notes. So I haven't got any questions arranged. So we're just chatting as we go along. So,
well, I like Marta's question in there because I think that she's spot on about that. The forming of new habits and activities is very important, but do you agree that the pandemic makes that harder? Bruce, what's been your experience coaching people through that? Because I know I have seen a lot of people who were kind of doing pretty well pre-pandemic and fell off the rails, so to speak, and then others who are still doing okay. But I'm curious what your experience has been.
Absolutely. And I would say the last 2 months, our inquiry rate has gone through the roof. Not through the roof, but it's increased. I would say about 30%, 40%. Wow. I was absolutely fascinated. I've got a lovely client that I work with who works with children in an organization. It's children who have, what's the expression? But they have at some point mentioned that they would like to commit suicide. And she was saying that the rate has gone up by about 30% of the children that they are working with. And I think the figure's about the same here in Scotland anyway. And especially the one thing I'm noticed at the moment is, as we're starting to come out of lockdown now, a lot of people are now starting to realize that they're going to have to go back to work, and they're coming out of what the last 12 months or so has become normal, being in the bubble. Now people are having to go back to work. They're having to go back to, and some people's drinking has increased during the isolation and being stuck in the house. So yeah, it's definitely increased. And a lot of people some people are really glad that it's, I found during COVID, some people used it. No, their circumstances were comfortable and safe enough for them to go through the reduction process, being away from everyday stress. So they actually made it easier for some people, and mostly people in marriages or who had kids who were then having to homeschool, and all of a sudden the whole family were just in the house 24/7.
Yeah.
But there was nothing wrong with the marriage or anything, but it just made another stress and another everything else. So it kind of went two ways. And as we're coming out of it, I'm finding that we're having, some people are really excited that they're coming out of it and they're going to be able to speak to people and talk to people again. Not, you could do that anyway, but in person. And then other people are getting quite scared that they're going to have to go back to work, or they're going to have to go back and do the normal stuff. And I'm getting a lot of inquiries now saying, I'm going back to work in 2 months. I need to get my drinking under control again. So, but yeah, so it's definitely has had an impact.
Yeah, I know, because if I was going through TSM right now, just starting out during this pandemic, it'd be a different kind of challenge, because I was able to go to movies and go out to dinner and see friends and, really do those new habits or hobbies that were accessible then. But I think, like, for people at home trying to do new hobbies or habits now, it's like, really, how can you get creative with doing things at home? Like, I remember I would paint a lot at home. Even though I'm a terrible painter, I was like, I'm going to paint because I don't know what else to do. I used to like that as a kid. So just doing little things, like not making it some extravagant thing of like, oh, I can't go to the gym or I can't go to a movie, but hey, I can have a movie night at home or paint something, or walk in nature, or whatever is doable in this pandemic. But it has been a lot harder, for sure.
Yeah,
I agree.
And for someone who's been through the program, I know we were talking earlier on about you don't have the day-to-day white knuckling and all that kind of stuff. Taking aside just the change in lifestyle with with COVID and the staying in the house, did you find it difficult? Did it increase the craving at all, or did that all stay the same?
No, it all stayed the same. I think I've just developed new ways to cope now. If I've had a really bad day, I go for a walk or I take a hot bath or something. And that's my preference, because I've just trained myself. I've told some people, like, I used to have, 5 o'clock was wine o'clock. And now at 5 o'clock, I've trained myself to enjoy like an ice cold glass of sparkling water. And so 5 o'clock rolls around and I'm like, I want some sparkling water. So it's interesting how we can teach ourselves these new habits. And it just takes like, little consistent steps every single day. But the key is to consistently do it. And in my coaching, I'm a big fan of, and I think you are too, of like really small changes over time, just micro changes. And I think that can help people create new habits. But, over the few years I've been sober, I have had some like thoughts of drinking, mostly if I'm in Sonoma and there's wine tasting all around, and I just like very much romanticize that experience. But like, it's more been just a passing thought and not a real urge. Like I said, I have naltrexone. I could drink if I want to, but I've just never had a strong enough urge to take the nal and do it. So.
And going back to something you said earlier on, that I've just been thinking about as well, was that I've got a client as well who described, you were talking about having to change your relationship with alcohol. Mm-hmm. I've got a client who describes it as breaking up from a girlfriend that he shouldn't have gone out with in the first place.
Yes, that's such a perfect analogy. That is so true. Like, oh, it's so good, but it's so bad.
Yeah. He said it was a poisonous relationship that should never have happened in the first place. He said, but there was a comfort, there is a comfort in it. Yep. And he said, so breaking up, there was a period of, what's the word?
Like
when you
mourning.
lose mourning, that's the word.
Yeah.
Mourning. Yeah. So he said there was a period of mourning where he's had to realize that, okay, and that's a past life. And
yeah, it's not good for me.
So yeah. So what are your plans for the coming future with TSM? Or
that's a good question. Yeah, it's like so cheesy. When I started making the videos, it was like how you're cliche, how people say, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. But like, that's truly how I feel. And I really love talking about TSM and promoting it and helping people through the process. It just, for whatever reason, I think that's part of my calling in life. And so just whatever I can do that kind of supports raising awareness about it and supports people through the process, that's what I want to focus on. So I'll continue to create content as much as I can and coach people. And, I know you're a host in the daily TSM calls for people. I'm going to come back to hosting one day a week there. For anyone who's not familiar, those are just daily calls through Zoom where you can meet with others who are on the TSM method. And Bruce is a host on Thursdays. And you can find out the schedule on embodydaily.com. But I want to continue doing what I'm doing. What about you? Like, do you have aspirations I know you kind of talked a bit about it, what you're doing to raise awareness in Scotland, but what else?
So do you want my big picture or do you want where we're at?
I want a big picture. I want a dream.
I'm doing a number of things. I'm learning to unicycle at the moment.
Okay.
And we've got a route around the north of Scotland called the NC 500. So I'm learning to unicycle around the NC 500. It's 500 miles.
Wow.
But I keep falling off it, so I've got to do a bit more practice.
It's going to take you a while if you can't stay on the unicycle.
But the whole thinking behind that initially was that I have to raise awareness for the Sinclair method here in Scotland, because I'm the only person that's working the Sinclair method here.
Wow.
And I have to raise awareness for it. And I thought, I need to come up with some crazy idea that's going to attract maybe the wrong attention, I don't know, but to create enough awareness of what we're doing to raise some funds. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is we've got all our fingers crossed at the moment. We've just applied for an investment program. And I don't know if we have been successful yet. We should be hearing sometime this week. But if we are successful there, then the potential of investment is quite high. I hope. This is all hope at the moment. If not, I genuinely believe that the success rate we've got here, there's enough avenues here in Scotland for me to find other places to get the money. And I would like the Sinclair method to be not necessarily the number one program, but I would like it to be along just as big a choice as AA, CA, NA, smart meetings, which are all very good in their own right. But I would like the Sinclair method to be an option for people. And it's going to be a hard road, but I'm going to, I think the longer you work with it, and you'll have the same thing. We had a lovely lady. Oh, she's I don't know how old she was. She was 35. But the whole process of the addiction side of things, she took her own life about a week ago.
Wow.
And it was really, really difficult for a couple of days. But when you're working in that front line kind of thing, you realize that, and you know yourself, you work with it every day, and people are coming to us on a regular basis, and it's working for person after person. That there's, like yourself, whether you call it, is it a calling, is it something has clicked in my head now that if I go to my grave and this, I have to do whatever I have to do to make the Sinclair method available to whoever it can be available to here in Scotland.
Yeah.
But we just can't. That was one story a week ago from someone that I know, but I can guarantee you today. Well, Claudia used to give some figures, and it was scary. In the States today, there's people that have lost their lives through alcohol.
Yeah.
And it's got to stop. Well, as much as we can. So.
Yeah. It's lost potential in people. And I really appreciate what Eric said about, in the chat, the biggest thing is finding compassion for yourself. And I think that's so true. Like, you have to learn to really care for yourself. At least that was true in my experience, because with alcohol, it's such a self-destructive habit. Even though momentarily it might feel good and pleasurable, like ultimately what you're doing is just slowly self-destructing. And so learning to take care of yourself and listen to your needs and find ways to cope and feel emotions, like really feel them without numbing out. It's such a healing process, but it's a journey. It takes time and takes kind of, new experiences every single day. But that's what I love so much about this method, is just that it's such a gentle way. And I think you used the word too. It's a gentle way to undo this, where you can listen to your craving, you can surrender to it, you can drink, and slowly with time, you're undoing that connection. And learning to have compassion and really take care of yourself is a huge part of the healing process, for sure.
Mm. And I just want to give a quick shout out as well. Jenny Williamson has put a message on, but Jenny is Claudia's. Claudia will always say that Jenny does all the hard work behind the scenes, and I'm sure she does.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I know. That's true.
So I just need to give a big shout out to Jenny as well. She does all the behind the scenes stuff for Claudia on the C3 Foundation, and does an amazing job. So thank you, Jenny.
Yeah, and the TSM conference is coming up June 12th and 13th on Twitch. So for people who are not aware of that, go to the C3 Foundation's website.
Yeah. And Marta was also thinking a word of mouth will be powerful. Each success leads to another. I think there's a lot of truth in that as well, because I think when we realized how successful it is, I'm very guilty of pushing things or wanting to go from where we're at to having Scotland as the covered in TSM, but it's one person to another person. Yeah. And it was a mutual friend of ours. I better not mention his name just in case, but there's a doctor that we both know. Yeah. And I'm sure he was talking about there's a tipping point that when it gets to about 18%, and then the crowd mentality just takes over, and it kind of then takes us on a life of its own. So we have to push it up the hill till about 18% of the population are aware that it's a good concept. Wow. And then from then it then takes off itself. So we have to do a bit of hard work and work on there. So yeah. So I suppose we've got about 5 minutes. Any we're going to try and do this once the first Wednesday of every month. So it's not going to be absolutely guaranteed every month, just in case anything crops up from both our ends. But if we're available, I think Katie was okay to do it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, and if there are certain topics or things, people should reach out to you or me to let us know if they want us to talk about certain topics.
Yeah. And anything to finish with, or anything to?
I don't think I have anything else. I did see Marta just put in the chat about Claudia and Jenny's last 2 sessions on shame and self-care. So that is another opportunity to watch live stream discussions on the Sinclair method. The C3 Foundation's been really great about putting more content out lately and on really relevant topics. So that's great, Marta, that you're watching it, and I hope others are as well. And yeah, I'm so excited to have this chance to talk all things TSM with you, Bruce. It's a great opportunity. Thank you for driving it.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, if it wasn't for your videos, I was saying it was definitely Claudia's that I saw to start with.
Yeah.
But then I went on and I thought, well, there must be other videos on YouTube, and then
you're all mad. Who else is out here promoting this blasphemy?
And it's just I mean, if anyone's new to the process, it's very, very difficult to explain everything and talk everything through in just an hour. But the process works. That's without going into all the details again. The process works. It's got a 78% clinically proven test rate. It's not a magic pill. You have to do the work. You have to put the work in behind it. Get support if you're in America. Embodieddaily.com or C3 Foundation. Get some support structure. I say it's very good to have people alongside you, but it's also, I think, very, very important to get someone who is knowledgeable on how the actual process works.
Yeah. And
I think sometimes as well, people need to have someone at the end of the phone who understands the process, who can sometimes actually say, "You're okay. You're okay this week. Don't panic. You're okay. Just keep taking your pill. You need to have a couple of weeks where you get used to your new level, and then we'll go again. Or if it's gone up a little bit, like you said earlier on, we've learned a little bit from it." I love that expression. Create space. I'm going to be using that all the time now.
Please.
Because it does. That's what it does. I never realized that. It creates. One thing I'm always talking to people about abstinence is that when on an abstinent-based process, there's no time. They just suddenly stop, and then they've got to deal with everything in one thing before the craving kicks in enough allow the craving to win. But here it allows enough time, and it allows you to reduce a little bit. And then if you have a life situation, you can then level out, or you can increase a little bit just to deal with that. And then you can get back in the saddle and you can carry on. Creates enough space. I like that. That's going to be my new expression. So I heard someone say years ago, whenever you hear something new, when you come up with some wisdom, the first person I speak to, I'm going to say to them, "I was speaking to Katie last night and she said such and such." And then the second person you speak to, you say, I was speaking to someone the other day, and they said, and by the third time, it's like, I think.
Oh my gosh, that is so funny. I had this brilliant idea.
I came up with this great idea. And
well, I just say that from my own experience because that's how it felt. I was like, oh my gosh, I have space to heal and think, as opposed to just resist cravings and be abstinent. It was like there was leeway. And so it felt really good.
So I'll say this on a public thing, so that if anyone that knows me is speaking to me in the next few days and I say, I thought this, you can say, no, it wasn't Bruce, it was Katie.
That's so funny. Well, there's no trademark or anything, so feel free to take the credit, Bruce.
Yeah. The nice thing I've learned about what we do, and that's what I love about you, I have to say, the nice thing, and with C3 as well, Claudia, Jenny, all the guys that I've worked with, in this line of work, there's no room for ego. And it's not about who's doing what, where, when, and why. It's about you deal with it every day. It's people's lives we're playing with here. So not playing with them, but
yeah.
So thank you very much. So
thank you. It was really fun. Thanks everyone in the chat too. Thank you for your contribution and questions. And thank you.
And we'll upload this audio onto a podcast. I'll try and figure that one out. And just for Katie, embodieddaily.com for anyone that's listening to this on a podcast, embodieddaily.com, or C3 Foundation in the States, or as myself, alcoholrecoveryscotland.co.uk. If anyone's got any questions, I'm sure Katie's more than happy to answer any questions about the process.
Yes, always.
And definitely across here in Scotland or UK, if you've got any questions, we don't charge for a phone call, so it's all free of charge. So.
And Bruce is the man. He knows what he's doing.
Well, I've learned from you and Claudia and the guys in the States. So.
Well,
and thank you for your Zoom meetings as well, because that's where I learned a lot of what I know today.
Yeah, thank you for coming. You'd be up at 2 a.m. or something watching those meetings. It was good to have you.
It was initially, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's us, I think, for this one. First Wednesday of next month, live on here. We might find some other avenues to put it out on live as well. I can add it onto here as well. So, but we'll sort that out. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you. Talk to you later.
And we'll speak to everyone soon.
Bye.
Okay, bye.